Awesome. So Lisa, if you could just give me, what is your title and how long have you been with Cockroach?
Yeah, I was brought in to head up the developer relations program here. So I guess my title is head of developer relations. But it's, involved in that as community architecting, obviously developer advocacy, all the things. I've been at Cockroach Labs for since October.
Mhm.
And Jim was not only a developer in his early days, he was also a great community member. So I had the pleasure of meeting Jim Walker through the community and through some of the great work he did in the community. And that's kind of how it works. That's how I ended up here in October.
Right. And so, yeah, you've been with us a shorter time than our other guests. And I'm Ruta. What is your role now and how long have you been with Cockroach Labs?
My current role is developer advocate. I started this role in November, but I have been at Cockroach Labs for over 3.5 years now, and I was the tech writer for Cockroach DB and Cockroach Cloud, part of Cockroach DB and all of Cockroach Cloud.
And Amruta, 3.5 years is like it's like 4 lifetimes, I think, at this company. So yeah, and I think Amruta, you've been such a passionate advocate for the developer. We'll talk a little bit about this during the session, but I think Docs and DevRel are kind of closely related, right? So
Yes.
yeah, and I think a natural transition. I remember when I first started, you're one of the very first people I met, and I think you and I've been talking about DevRel for how long? About a year and a half, 2 years, right?
Yeah. I think August 2019, a
Yeah,
long time ago. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, all right, great. Well, I'm gonna get rid of slides here, and let's get our faces here instead of these crazy slides. So. And I did have some basic talk track, but like I said before, if anybody does want to ask questions, please do so in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and talking to my great guests as well at the same time. So let's just start out with a really simple question, because I think, as we were going through the process of defining developer relations here at Cockroach, which I think has been a bit of a journey for us, right? Marie, you've been with us all the way through this journey. I think we struggled a little bit with the definition, right? I think it was kind of interesting. So let's just start with you, Lisa, and I would love to get your definition as well, Amrita, because I think it's, it'll be a really nice kind of alignment or maybe misalignment. But like, how do you define developer relations, Lisa?
Yeah. So there's this classic famous mantra that DevRel folks live by, and it goes, to the community, I represent the company. To the company, I represent the community. But I keep both equally in my mind and in my heart at all times. And you really are that. You are the voice of your company to the community. You are definitely the voice of your community back to your company, to get all that great feedback in. And you're the engagement. You're finding out where your community is. A lot of times, especially if you're in open source, it's places you might not expect. And how do you engage with that community? How do you enhance their experience with, in this case, Cockroach, or the other open source projects that we're involved in here? And then how do you get all of that goodness back to the company, and you create a better product roadmap and all of that stuff? And I would say the third part of developer relations that is super important, especially for open source companies, is how do you foster great contributors to open source communities? Again, our product, our open source product, as well as the docs, as well as the open source projects that we're involved in out in the community and that we support. So for me, it's all of those things.
Right, it's a lot. I'm rooted. What did we miss, or is there do you take a slightly different kind of definition?
I think my definition of DevRel has evolved over the past 1.5 years that we have been thinking about DevRel at Cockroach Labs specifically. So we started off with this bigger mission of code, content, community, like all of it. And I think over time we have evolved to the definition that Lisa believes in, which is we already have really good engineers and contributors working on the code, but our docs are really, really good. So we have the content, and we also have a very solid content marketing team. What we need to focus on now is the community, which
Yeah.
is why we have Lisa now, because she's fabulous at it.
Right, and I think that engagement is a key piece of it, right? I think Lisa, you said something interesting. It's like, how do you're an advocate for the developer, but you're also an advocate for the company, right? Like, and I love the word advocate because it kind of fits here. It's almost like developer advocates. Almost, I love the word advocacy personally. How do you balance the two, right? Like I think that's a tough job, right? Because you are employed by Cockroach, and I mean, I think that's important too, and
Yeah.
we're proud to have you. We're happy to have you. But I think the community loves you as well. I know you run the largest cloud native community on the planet in the Bay Area, right? And that community adores you, right? And great, right? So like, how do you balance those two sides, Lisa?
Yeah. Sorry, this light is driving. I don't want to set any triggers off for anyone with flashing lights, and they're still going. Sorry about that.
You're good.
Yeah, it's true. Well, the lucky thing here at Cockroach is Cockroach already gets it. They already understand the importance of that engagement with developers. I didn't have to come in and explain that. I mean, you came after me because you already understood that. And I think that's a really important thing for those of you that are out there building your own DevRel teams and building, trying to figure out how to engage with your communities. Make sure that you get that buy-in from the top, and that there's an understanding that your job and your loyalty is as much to the community as it is to the company. And when your company gets that from the top down, which I'm so blessed to work at a company that understands the importance of that developer engagement, then it makes your job easier, and you don't have that conflict. That conflict comes in when your company doesn't understand the importance of developer advocacy and developer relations, and they try to monetize the relationship with developers, or they try to overly sell things to developers and try to get a community and make it into a lead gen campaign situation. And that is where it doesn't work. So you really just have to have that buy-in from the top, and you have to make sure that your goals are aligned with the goals of the company. So if you're, a DevRel person and you're looking for your next opportunity, make sure you find a company that has the goals that are aligned, that are very developer centric and supportive of developer communities.
Yeah, I think it's a really important piece, and like the one sentence you said out of there, Lisa, I think it's just the most important is buy-in from the top. We're lucky here at Cockroach. Spencer, Peter, and Ben. I mean, they're all three of them are amazing software engineers. I wouldn't even call them developers. They are true. Like some of the stuff that Ben builds. How about it, you guys? It's kind of like, wow. I scratch my head sometimes. But I think they get it, right, and they understand the importance of it, and I think it's driven throughout the whole company. But I think when we first started, we were not kind of developer focused in our product. We weren't like going out and actively seeking a community of people to contribute and stuff, right? Ruta, we've really changed over the last year, right? And like, what do you feel was like the driver behind all that? And I mean, you've been with us a long time, and you've seen this kind of transition, right?
Yes. So here's how I remember it. I don't know how accurate this is, but this is what my memory is at this moment. Is when we started off, when I started at Cockroach, we were still a very small team. Like I think I'm employee 46 at Cockroach Labs. And that time it was a company by engineers for engineers. We didn't even have a sales team. We didn't have Robert on board, like not even the customer service or sales. We had none of that. And then when we hired them, we were like, oh, I guess we need to think about enterprises now. So that was like the first iteration of like, okay, let's move from by engineers for engineers to like enterprises. And then once we set that up, we then realized that, but our roots are still developers, and we didn't want to just serve enterprises and let go of our roots, which is why we consciously decided to go back to a more developer focused, being a more developer focused community and company.
Yeah. And I think we've always had a developer focus, and I think having engineers, I will never miss an opportunity to say great things about our documentation. I think anybody who's seen me talk on one of these things, somehow magically on a Cockroach Hour, it always come back to our docs. Like, I feel like, originally Ruta, I think docs was our main thrust and our main kind of component of developer relations, right?
Yes, this is actually something that I've always been impressed by. Like Jesse, our OG tech writer and my
Right.
manager, he is a very early employee at Cockroach Labs. And I think that was a very interesting decision on the founder's part to have documentation and like the documentation lead be one of the early employees. I think documentation gets punted down the road in a startup life cycle, but they knew that docs would be the key to help people use Cockroach DP. So I think that's where like the seed of DevRel was always from the beginning of like, no, we need to do everything we can to make it easy for the developers. So get the best docs person in.
That's right. And he was like one of the first 10 or so people, right? I'm Ruta. I think it was like very early, right?
Yeah, I think he's employee 14 if I'm not wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, you two are wonderful humans, and I think Jesse is one of those really wonderful humans, but a poet and a technical person, like, and that's a really interesting mix because I think our docs are compelling, and I think that is that I think a big piece of our DevRel, like, kind of, when we look at all the components together, I think there's the people that do these things. You know, I want to go back to something you said, Lisa. You talked about goals of what DevRel does and what these kind of lay out as. You know, me personally, I've worked for two different, you know, this one is, this company's amazing because, like, Spencer totally gets this stuff. And I think it's like, as you guys are saying, like, top down, the focus on developer is important. You know, I worked at another open source company, you know, it was in Hadoop, and, you know, the leader of that company was a salesperson. And so community was a distribution of our product vehicle almost. You know what I mean? Like, we did some great things to build a large community around Hadoop, but, like, you know, it was important for us to get the product out there. I think that's a little bit different with you know, what you guys are looking after in DevRel. Like, how do you set goals, Lisa, for DevRel? What are our, you know, what does that look like for us, and how does that, like, you know, ratchet up into the corporate objectives?
Yeah, well, the corporate objectives are obviously, building the best product that we can build, and that's part of it. So that feedback back into the product is a big part of it. Um, Engagement and driving towards some of our, you mentioned the docs and our education, Cockroach University. That's a great place for us to drive people so that they have a better experience with our product. I mean, the docs is totally DevRel because it's all about that user experience. And the fact that our docs are so great is a large contribution to why our user experience is so great. And, when we do hackathons, I mean, I would argue that Amrita has been doing DevRel for years because she's been running these hackathons.
Yeah.
She's been doing all of these activities in the community, and driving people to Cockroach University and pointing people to the docs, and, building up, on our Slack channel where community is helping itself. That's really the goal. So, evangelism and awareness of the brand out in the community is also a big goal. Obviously, you want that reach, and that's where we can help a lot. Interesting during the years of COVID when we're not actually feet on the street in the community like we normally are. But, people have been patient with the virtual conferences, and we're learning how to engage virtually and how to use the platforms like the Discord channels and the Slack channels. And all of those numbers and all those metrics and all the engagement that we can measure, whether it's social or forums or at events, those are numbers that can be measured that can track up to our goals, our key results, as we call them here.
Yeah. And I think brand is one of those words too, Lisa. It's funny. It's like, it's kind of got a corporate thing to it, but in the context of developer relations, right? This word brand it's something else, right? Like,
it's huge. I mean, look at, like you mentioned Hadoop. You survived because of that ridiculously fun branding. And look at Docker, and I'm wearing a GitHub shirt today that my friend Jono gave me years ago, but I still love it. I mean, whenever I'm going to run a meetup, I'm always thinking about, okay, what fun shirt am I going to wear? And these things trend on brand alone. I mean, Docker's probably the best example of a really fun brand that probably was more fun than the product experience. So I think at Cockroach, I personally think we have an extremely fun brand, and I'd love to do even more with it. But we've also got an incredible product, so it's not just a brand that's going out there and then people are going to be disappointed when they use it, because then you've got a real management situation in the community. You've got an identity crisis and you've got a bunch of disgruntled users. But, and also having a brand that's the new thing, the cutting edge, that, what's the cool thing in technology right now. And so that branding, I wouldn't say it's corporate at all. I would say have fun with it, and, make it a part of the fun part of your community.
right. And is it, maybe I'll ask you, Marta, do you know, there's like the corporate brand. It's like, okay, our product and our company, and like, okay, we have this funding and all these things. And I think that's one brand. I think they're all related, Lisa. And I think this is exactly what you're saying. we're also fun, and we're also have some great engineers, and there's like a community brand as well. I mean, do we kind of look at it that way, Amrita?
I have been figuring this out as like in the past 3 months since I moved into this role. But my one observation about our brand is that we are known as the helpful people. Like like even at hackathons, I think our community brand is that we are the place to go to when you need help, irrespective of whether you need help with Cockroach or something else. For example, at Hack the North right now, we had people come to us with SQLized questions, and our engineers were like digging deep into them and like helping them out with the apps, which had nothing to do with Cockroach DB. Like they were using Cockroach DB, but that's not what their questions were about. So we are the place to go to when you need help. And I really like that that's our community brand.
I love that. Like like, is that not just like the best core to build a community from? Like, we'll help. Like, we're just here to help everybody. It's kind of like, I mean, I think that's I think one of the key concepts that's helped the Kubernetes community grow, isn't it? I mean, Lisa, would you say the same thing?
The best example of recent, yeah, and my last company was a cloud native storage company. And I remember, our engineers were brilliant. They had to be experts on Kubernetes before they could be experts on running day two stateful applications on Kubernetes, because that's not where people were falling down. People were, maybe not implementing Kubernetes in the most functional way. And so when you go and start digging into the problems, you kind of have to be an expert on the whole stack, right? And, I'm assuming that part of the people on the call right now are full stack engineers, and they're used to looking at the big picture, and thinking about, like they'll be architects in their next generation of their career. So I think those are the folks that, and we have a lot of those folks here. They have to think about the big picture. And if you're going to help your customer, it's probably not going to be a Cockroach DB problem every single time, right? So you're going to have to understand all the technology and be very helpful. And that's why we hired doc writers to do DevRel, because
Exactly.
they're extremely helpful from the beginning.
That's right, Lisa. And your community is much bigger than that, right? And it's the humility too to be able to work within the context of not just your single focus, but like to be curious, to ask the questions, to work with the like. So I think we like the thing about the Kubernetes community, for me at least, Lisa, and you and I have been involved in that community for a while. I'm just proud to be part of that group of people. Like, I think there's certain characteristics of a great, developer relations or a developer community that rises out of a singular product or multiples or whatever that is. And I think that in turn kind of helps you to find the type of people that you want on a DevRel team, right? And so what do you feel are like the key characteristics of somebody who's really good with developer relations? Either Lisa or Maruta, I look at both of you as like perfect examples of these kind of characteristics.
We're both very different from each other, which is great. I agree with you. The Kubernetes community is wonderful. They really focused a lot on diversity in the early stages, and it was one of the most diverse communities I joined back then. I mean, I live in the Silicon Valley, and I've been doing this a really long time, and it's these communities they were looking, especially in open source, they just were looking a lot alike for years and years and years. Kubernetes came around and it was refreshing. And I would also say the same thing about the Go community. I think the Go community is awesome. And one of the reasons I wanted to come to a place like Cockroach is, it's one of the largest Go projects. It gives us an energy that other communities I've been involved in don't have inherently. It's a great community. So finding communities like that have that energy are awesome, and being involved in those projects. But to answer your question about what you look for in a DevRel person, first of all, you need diversity in your team because your community is going to be diverse. So you need team members that are going to represent a sample of what your community looks like, and that there's no way you're going to find that in one person. And then you need advocates, and you need technical evangelists, and you need a lot of doc writers. You need a lot of niche roles, but you also need, especially if you're a one woman team, one person team, the skills that you need are such a bizarre combination of skills that is really hard to find in one person. Because of course you need to be able to understand the technology, you need to be able to advocate for developers. You also need to be a really good listener. You need to be super empathetic. because you have to understand what's really going on with your developers and with your community. But you also need to understand what's going on in your company and understand how to tie your goals back up to your company and tie them to ROI numbers, or your programs aren't going to exist, in the next year. So, you have to have some understanding of the business that you're in as well. So it's a lot of different skills in one person that it's really hard to find in just one person. So it's good to have a bigger team, but if you don't have a big team, you need to look at one person who has multiple different skills.
Yeah. Ruta, what about the characteristics of the person itself that's going to do this role?
Yeah, from an individual contributor, I'm realizing the most important skill is curiosity and being able to keep learning. Because, like I said, I was focused on a small part of Cockroach DB and Cockroach Cloud as a tech writer. But now that I'm the developer advocate for both the products, I need to be able to learn different parts of the product pretty quickly. And also, like Lisa said, there are a lot of invisible admin tasks that I've never thought about, like expensing hackathon bills. I don't know how to do that. But then if I'm curious enough and if I'm willing to learn, then that's something that I can pick up. So yeah.
I think
Can I just say one more thing? Because I don't know if there's folks on the call who are looking into building this role out, or contributing in open source communities. So I think that's a huge part of it. If you're looking for who's going to be good at this job, you have to look for who's already doing this job, and especially the people who are doing this job that aren't getting paid to do this job.
Yeah.
So who's out there building these open source communities, or who's out there like the Rutas doing doc writing, but also running all these hackathons on her free time, and doing all, she's got a YouTube channel where she's making videos and helping the community learn and understand things. Who's already going and doing this really cool stuff because they have a passion for it? Because if you don't have a passion for it, you are going to burn out in the worst ways. So that's what I was looking for around this company. There's a lot of amazing people at Cockroach already doing DevRel. There's product managers who are doing stuff. There's engineers who are doing stuff. There's people who run their own Twitch stream. There's people who are in app dev communities who are helping, engage there. There's a lot of engagement that's already happening in DevRel. So I look for the people who are already doing the job. And those are the folks that are going to be really good at doing the job because they're passionate about it.
That's really interesting, Lisa. In fact, I think it's the job of everybody in the community to do DevRel, right? Like, and I don't say in the company, I kind of purposely say in the community because I think there's other people who actually advocate for whatever this technology is that's a part of a community. In the context of Cockroach DB, like, yeah, sure, Jordan has his Twitch stream, which is awesome, right? But like, other people want to join that. I do this because it's fun and we aren't talking about Cockroach all the time. And, I'd rather not talk about Cockroach. Actually, I'm tired of talking about Cockroach. I wake up and talk about, it sounds so funny to just talk about cockroaches all day. It just, but I think it's one of these things where I think everybody does it. This leads me to a very, this is always an interesting question. And Marie-Namphy, you were around when we were trying to figure this out and you were directly involved in this decision. Where does DevRel fit in an organization? Is it an engineering function? Is it a marketing function? Is it an HR function? It can fit in a lot of where should it roll up? And I don't think there's an answer here, but Ruta, what do you think?
So when we started this process, I was absolutely convinced that it had to be on engineering because again, we are an engineer by engineers for engineers. That's our origin story. So I didn't see this working at any other department if we didn't have the engineering buy-in. But now that we have it on marketing and I see it from the other side, marketing budgets are awesome. They have much more tactical and logistical knowledge that engineering doesn't. And we have the engineering buy-in. I think that's what makes it work is that we have all this expertise here and then we have the buy-in from the engineering team. And that's the perfect match for us.
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, there's always an answer to every question. And so, that's answering those important questions are really important. I've done this role both ways. I've done it in engineering teams, I've done it in marketing teams, and there's definitely reasons to do it in, one or the other. You have to look at the company and how that company is set up. We're very blessed to be working for a CMO that absolutely gets it, that understands developer relations, that has been an engineer and run developer programs, that really, really gets it. And so in this company, it was a perfect fit for the resources that we need, for the vision that the marketing team has, because the entire marketing team is actually driven to be doing DevRel in some way or another. So I think in this company, it really made sense. In other companies, it doesn't. It makes more sense to have it in engineering, especially if that marketing team is going to try to have traditional marketing metrics to measure that role. Like, quotas of some kind, lead gens, demand gen quotas. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked for, when I run meetups, it's like, well, where are the leads from that meetup? Like, that's not how it works. So you have to have an understanding of how it works and what you're going to measure, and then have some leniency there. But for open source communities as well, again, that's generally, you're not going to be getting paid to be doing that. So, you're going to have to give people, you have to find companies to give people the bandwidth to go contribute to open source communities, whether they're writing code, whether they're organizing meetups. There is lots of ways to contribute, and open source wouldn't exist. And then I would argue software wouldn't exist the way we know it, and we wouldn't be able to build it this way if we didn't support open source communities. So, I think that there is a responsibility for companies. I mean, we all consume open source software, so why not contribute to it? But then even as individuals, like I was saying before, look for people who would do this job if they weren't getting paid to do this job. I was in open source communities. I built two of the largest open source communities for projects that I never got paid to do, for 10, 15 years. So you have to kind of balance all of these things. And to me, it doesn't matter where the role fits, as long as that buy-in and that reporting chain, and that there's an understanding of what the role is in the team that it's living in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm in complete agreement with both of you, and I think that's it's how it works. It's funny. My role is product marketing, and people will often ask me like, "Oh my God, how do you define product marketing? What does product marketing do?" I'm like, I don't know. It depends on you and your company, because companies are not like the same. Like the constituency of the company is the people, and the unique fingerprint of every company will dictate how that role fits.
Yeah.
And,
And look at you, you're such a natural evangelist. I mean, you could be in engineering and you could be in marketing, but you kind of bled over to marketing because you love telling stories. You love engaging with people, you love being out there in the community in a really natural, evangelistic way. And that's a big component of this job. If you're going to be that voice to the community, you have to engage in the community. You can't phone this thing in, you can't build a community without participating and engaging hands-on in the community. So you have to enjoy that. You don't have to be an extrovert. I don't think, okay, I was going to say, I don't think any of us on this call, but I will say two of the three of us right now on this call are not extroverts. It doesn't have to be a natural, oh, I just have to be around people, but there has to be a love for, bringing these stories to people, engaging with people, understanding what they're building, having fun. I love hearing what people are building with our technology. I mean, people build really cool stuff, even in the hackathons when they only have a weekend to do it. We have seen some innovative applications come out built on Cockroach TV in these hackathons from students just spending Friday and Saturday nights. That is so fun for me. I love that engagement.
Well, Lisa, I know you're an introvert, and that's wonderful. I'm Ruta, and I will stick with our extrovert ways. No, I'm the introvert. I don't know. I don't know what I am half the time, but it's interesting. I think there's just certain characteristics, Lisa. And you asked me why did I love. To me, it's the curiosity and it's the helping other people, which I think the two things. Like, Ruta, I know you, and we've all touched on that. You know why I became a marketer? Because I hated salespeople. Sorry, salespeople, if you're on the call, but they would get up in front of people and they would start saying things, and I'd be like, "Oh, don't say that. No, don't. No, that's not right. Oh," and I was a developer, and I'm like, "You just added 8 weeks of scope. Don't say that." And that's why I became a developer. That's why I became a marketer. But ultimately, why I loved being a marketer was that, when I first became a marketer, it was the early 2000s. The developer wasn't, as they are now, king, right? Like the developer was just like this engine that just got stuff done, right? Like the business. it was a different game then. And I always was concerned that, you know, like I just wanted to be an advocate for all the cool work that development did, because it's its own poetry code. And I think it's beautiful, and I think it's kind of cool. And like, for me, it was very natural. Right. And I gravitated. Yeah, sure, I'm a marketer, but I think I'm a bit of an evangelist as well. I like to think of myself that way. So, but you know, why did, you know, what was your journey to let's just start with you, Amrita, right? Like you know, why do you do what you do? Right. I think you were in docs and now you're doing this. Like, what is it that drives you?
So the transition from docs to DevRel was because I was a docs writer for almost 10 years and I could feel myself getting stagnated. And I also had this YouTube channel on the side. So I knew, and I was like, I reached the staff tech writer position last year, which is the highest in the career ladder we have right now. They might expand it further, but I knew this was it. And then I was thinking of like, okay, what next? And then I had the YouTube channel, and then content creation is something that I enjoy in my free time. So I was thinking of if like would that be an like that seemed like the logical next step. And then we started thinking of DevRel, and I was like, oh, this is a thing, I should try it. So this was more of like, let me explore this new path and see where it takes me.
Yeah. And I think you're naturally a developer relations person, Amrita, from day
Oh,
one that I met you. So like, yeah, but we had these conversations when, you know, went back when we actually had an office and we could have lunch and we could stand around that high table, right? So,
yeah.
Lisa, what was your journey to become this? And less about like what you were doing, but like what drove you, right? Like what was the what yeah, why do you do this?
Yeah. Again, just a passion for building great technology and figuring out, you know, how to make that happen. I came from, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up on the Stanford campus, and when I was in high school, we used to build programs that we thought were really cool, and that, you know, of course we wanted to share that with all of our friends. It was like, this is really cool, and it helps me do this thing, and maybe it's going to help you too. And that's like the ethos of open source, and that's the, you know, the DNA of the Valley that I grew up in. And I'm like you, Jim, I've been in it long enough where like developers weren't cool back then, and, you know,
Oh,
couldn't, you know, ask for the keys to the kingdom like they can now. But at the time, you know, it was just, it really was a community. And I wasn't an engineer. Again, I went to school in an era where there was very few women doing, you know, techie geeky things. And so I came out of college with an English major, but I came back to the Bay Area and just learned Unix, and, you know, started working at Oracle and learned PL SQL and started the first developer tools group at Oracle, just because people weren't talking to each other. It's like, how we need to get this is, you know, we need to get these people together. They need to talk to each other. I need to talk to them. And, you know, it was like so obvious to me. And we didn't call it DevRel or Dev Advocacy back then. You know, Guy Kawasaki was doing his thing at Apple, but that was kind of the beginning of it even having a name. And so eventually, you know, maybe 12 years ago was the first time I started seeing the words like developer advocate. In the meantime, I'm just in these open source communities, and I'm working with, you know, OpenStack and running user groups, or, you know, just starting one because it didn't exist. And then you take it from there. So it just was, it was extremely natural to me. It was kind of obvious, if we're going to build technology, this is how it has to happen. And the collaborative nature of it, you know, also before everything was, people were so used to doing things online and doing things globally, you really did have communities and user groups that were pods in physical geographical locations, especially here in the Bay Area. So that was kind of how I got into it. And then as it did become global and online, then it's like, oh, okay, we can scale this, and we can also get a lot of voices over there, and we can figure out a social coding movement, because how come somebody in Yahoo Israel is developing the exact same code that I'm developing here in San Francisco? Like, let's share that. So, you know, enter GitHub and all of the social coding, and it's evolved from there. But I feel like I've been in it a little bit from the beginning, and I just absolutely love this part of our technology.
yeah, and I think that the advent of Git has changed a whole lot, and what GitHub did, I think, changed a whole lot of things. Lisa, you know, I think communities just build naturally. Honestly, like you know, when I coded, when I first came out of school too, I coded in a language called Smalltalk, and Smalltalk I'm going to argue with everybody. It's the best language ever created. And all these other object languages, they aren't objects actually, but there was a group of people that developed around a company called Park Place. And, you know, it was this wonderful group of like, great. And then they, you know, there was enough of us, we created a conference, and it was like, oh my God, it was like the biggest, it was like at the first meetup. And, you know, I met Kent Beck, and like, and so Kent Beck was part of this. And then like, he's building this book called Extreme Programming, and we were all contributing. And like, we had this IRC channel that we were chatting in it. And I think these things just naturally build.
You know, I'm going to disagree slightly. I think people come together naturally over common interests, and that can be a programming language or a technology. The community, this is where architecting communities, this is the magic behind the scenes that nobody really sees and doesn't even understand. And this is where it becomes a little bit of a thankless job. And I shouldn't say nobody, because there's amazing community architects out there. There's somebody behind that who's actually facilitating the ability for a community to stay together. So people get together, but then, you know, who's putting something in place in order to help sustain this community? And that is where community management and community advocacy, and I use the word architecting because I think a lot of intelligence and very thoughtful strategic planning has to go into actually building the community and maintaining it. And how do you keep, you know, churn from happening, and how do you have enough diversity that all the members of the community feel valued, and, you know, they have a place and a purpose, and all of those things don't happen naturally. The initial enthusiasm is natural, but the rest of the pieces is why this job is very difficult.
I love that. I love that term, you know, community architect versus community builder. Like, you know, I think of like, you know, I think one of the best architects I've ever seen around a community, and really is Dan Cohn, you know, God bless him, you know. And Dan was an architect, but he made that Kubernetes community diverse, right? He put the structure and the framework in place so that people could communicate in a respectful way. You know, he did help promote the conferences. He gave it the right forum, right? It's almost like, you know, if you create the right frame to the house, and then you huck fin everybody to come and build and paint the fence, you'll get a lot of community builders, right? So let me take that as a leaping point for my last questions. I've done a pretty good job actually building all our questions together. I have a good conversation here, and I'm happy, right? You guys, thank you. How can people get involved? You know, this is your chance to huck fin people into getting. I'm sorry, I love that term, by the way, y'all. Like, how you know, how do you get people involved? You know, where can people be involved in our community? You know, the Cockroach Labs community. I don't know, Lisa or Ruta, which one of you?
And Ruta wrote a whole blog about how to get started. I'm going to let her take this question first.
So the ways you can get involved with the Cockroach DB community is on our community Slack. You can also contribute to our code, our docs. You can also help build sample apps so that other people can learn how to build apps. If you want to write for us, you can Slack us on the community Slack, and we'll figure out the right forum and the right timeline for it. Also help answering questions on Stack Overflow or in any of the language specific Discord channels or Slack channels, wherever you find yourself. If there are Cockroach DB questions, go ahead and answer them. So yep, those are the ways.
Lots of ways
you can contribute. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of this came up actually on Jordan's Twitch stream on Friday. Someone was saying, "Oh, I wish I could get involved more in open source communities, but I just don't know how to." And there's great programs like Hacktoberfest that help you get started in open source for the first time. There's a lot of, we have them, Good First Issues. A lot of other projects do that as well. Publish ways that you can get started if you're new at this. And if you don't happen to be a star Go programmer, but you want to contribute to the docs, there's lots of ways you can contribute and get involved in the community. And if you just want to lurk for a while, join our Slack channel. I don't know, Jim, if you can put up, you know, words on the screen, but we can put up the short URL to go join our community Slack channel if you haven't done that yet. It's a great way to get engaged, and we're going to be building that out to have more of our voice get out into the community. So there's lots and lots of ways. And you know, Hacker News, go post something, you know, on there and say good things about Cockroach on there, and we'll engage. So lots of different ways.
Let me ask you one follow-on question to that, Lisa. Why should somebody be involved in the Cockroach community?
Really interesting question. Well, I think you get to engage with the best and brightest. Communities are all about learning from each other, networking. I mean, if you and I weren't engaged in community, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. And I wasn't trying to engage with Cockroach. We came together, kind of through just our community open source stuff and love for Kubernetes and love for multi-cloud and our undying, unwavering quest for the open cloud. We are both so passionate about that. So that is how we came together. And, Cockroach Labs is full of amazing people like that. So I think engaging with the best and the brightest is, well, number one reason to get involved with community. And then also just getting to be part of one of the hottest technologies right now on the market, and getting to whether you're going to contribute to making it better or whether you're just going to build the coolest app possible and share that with the world. We'll help amplify your voice. That's what a community can do for you. We can tell your story for you, and we can give you a platform that you might not have. And you've seen me at KubeCon. I'm always on stage with our customers. I never go on stage by myself. I'm always bringing people to tell stories and to shout from the rooftops. So those are just some of the whys, but there's so many.
Ruta, do you have anything you wanted to add on that, or?
I have an answer from like a new developer perspective. I think why new developers should get involved in the Cockroach DB community is because you get the whole end-to-end software development experience with engineers, like with really good engineers. Like if you contribute a PR to our code, you will go through the same review process, the same interaction with the engineers that an actual employee at Cockroach Labs will. So it's just really good hands-on experience, and just looks really good on your portfolio.
Yeah, I think you guys, I think it's such an important piece of your own development in terms of your own craft. And your craft to me is built through exactly as you're saying, Amrita, your experience and working with people and learning, and there's no bad questions, right? Like, you may think you have a stupid question, but there's, 40 other people have asked the same thing. And to have that like community of people to just, and to be involved and to build your own skill set is huge. But I just want to reiterate on just something that Lisa said, y'all, on our way out here. I've met some of the best people I've ever met in my life in various different communities. And I, for us, what I'm proud of most, and what you two in particular have been architecting over the past, I'm Ruta for a while, and then Lisa joining us, and some of the stuff that I've already been involved with you, Lisa, building and architecting is diverse groups of great people. Like, I could name 15 people right now that maybe Lisa and I know together that we both say like, oh my God, we're just wonderful humans. Oh my God, that's a wonderful human. Oh my God, and I think just, these communities are built of some good people too. And I think to me, that's the why. It comes back. I just like good people. So
yeah, you'll come for the technology, you'll stay because of the community.
Exactly, right? So I want to thank you both. I think we covered almost everything we had talked about, right? So I don't know, I missed anything in particular that you guys wanted to talk through? We're good, right?
If anyone has any other questions, you can find us on Slack. I'm Lisa on the Cockroach Slack channel, and Ruta is Ruta, I believe, on the Cockroach community Slack channel. Jim is probably Jim or Jim Walker on the Cockroach Slack channel. So, stay engaged, or hit us up on Twitter, wherever. We will keep the conversation going.
Lisa, I don't join companies unless I can get the email address Jim at. Like I just, that's my rule. Company's got to be small enough, unless there's a founder. Okay, I don't know. So
I was gonna say, I hate to know what happens to the other gyms that were there before.
No, I just get there before there's other gyms. I'm usually the first gym. So.
Yeah, Lisa's a little bit tougher a name to do that with, but we were small.
Ruta is pretty easy to get the first time. Ruta, there's less popular than Jim, I guess, at least in the States here. But
I was gonna say maybe in New York, but yeah. So Lisa at.
Right on. Ruta, thank you so much. Always enjoyable to have these conversations. Lisa, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining today. As Lisa said, please, we would love for anybody everybody to be involved in our community. It is a kind of it is growing into a nice place to be. So with that, thanks everybody for joining us today. A recording of this will definitely be available. I don't know. Y'all want to say goodbye?
I mean, hopefully it's just hello, and hopefully you stay as a part of our
Exactly, Lisa.
community.
All right, I'm Ruta. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye, everybody.